Hey, what's up, guys? So today, talking about five tenets of a secular path to God. Because in this day and age, I think it's a lot more critical that people start developing personal connection beyond a parish or a monastery. Uh, there's a teacher, G.I. Gurdjieff, George Gurdjieff, who spoke about uh, four mystical paths towards uh, spiritual evolution and a connection towards God. He spoke about the way of the fakir, the way of the yogi, the way of the sly man, which is the fourth path, and the monk. We have the fakir, the yogi, the monk, and the sly man. And realistically, in our day and age, the only way is the fourth way, the way of the sly man. And it's designed for regular people. Just, you go to work every day, standard. You're not living a life of contemplation in a monastery. You're not a fakir who is, you know, self-immolating, who's lashing yourself or like walking on hot coals, and the monk who goes through contemplation of books. The fourth way is kind of a combination of all the three previous paths, and you can see the similarities that this is held across all religions. There's, uh, you know, preacher, parish, the monk in a monastery, and then Christianity doesn't really have a self-immolation aspect. I guess that would kind of be like if you're um, maybe if you're like a Templar 1,000 years ago, or like you're a warrior monk, you might have that, I guess. But let's get to the five tenets. So I'm going to start off with listing them all off. You got meditation, breath work, fasting, prayer or chanting, and then a way of acting, marching, manual labor. And if you combine those five things, you don't generally need anything other than that and a strong desire to connect to God. I I got there through this route, and it's it's so much more simple than it's on to be, and it's not supposed to be ultra complex. I mean, once you get this baseline, then you can start getting more esoteric, and the reality will start unfolding in front of you, and it's something you can't really explain to anybody, which is why I believe this method is so important for us in the last days, where people don't really have a desire, they're too busy and connected with other things. B, they'd much rather find out for themselves, and yeah. So meditation, contemplation, that's, you really want to have a clear mind, and you need to get out of your own way. The biggest problem when it comes to learning about this stuff is your ego will start talking to itself, and you think you're getting some kind of mystical information when you're really not. You're just hearing your own internal monologue and getting excited. So you have to start a baseline of um, understanding what that ego mind is. There's an incredibly large amount of you know, reality is beyond the mind, but we have to use our mind in order to interact with it. Or that's generally the most common way. And for example, in the Islamic Sufi tradition, what you would do is spend, you know, let's just say an hour reading a passage in the Quran, and you meditate upon that, and you reflect on it and contemplate what it really means. And if you're centered enough and are able to recognize your ego mind, you can realize what isn't uh, self deception, inspiration, and what is actually something from the beyond. It becomes more complicated because generally evil will try to whisper in your ear before anything that's truly good. But I think uh, it's easier to start and then recognize the two, the good and the evil that starts communicating with you, and then reach a place of true silence, and then you'll be able to see which is, just your mind chattering, which is a dark inspiration that's kind of chaotic and not pure, and then finally reaching a pure stream of consciousness from the divine. Now, an easy way to clear yourself out in preparation for a meditation, or if you're in an overwhelmed state, is breath work. I personally have always loved doing the Wim Hof method. Wim Hof is a godsend. It's an incredibly good uh, thing for uh, your bodily health as well as your mental health, and it if you do it properly. So basically, the Wim Hof method is you do 30 breaths and then take a deep breath in and you hold it for, I do it for 2 minutes, 2 minutes 30 seconds, 3 minutes. It's a breath hold, then you take a deep breath in for 15 seconds, then you do 40 breaths, hold for 2 minutes, exhale. You see what I mean? There's guided ones online you can look up. But this is a great way to clear out yourself, and it's good for your body as well as the mind. Getting that blood flow is critical. The next one is fasting. Now, the fasting is less about food, but there's a lot of people who will do the 40-day fast, which is obnoxious. I mean that you probably will see Christ and you will connect it with a 40-day fast. That's insanity to me. But the practice of uh, so in our day and age, we don't have hunger really. I mean, you have what you'd be ego hunger. You have your schedule and it's like, time to eat now. But if you make a concerted effort and, you know, so the Ramadan way would be eat 3 in the morning and then fast all day until sundown. And really, this is just reverting back again to the meditative place where you're trying to recognize what is just your ego small s self chattering versus uh, coming to a truer place of inspiration. And when you do a fast, you're much more easily uh, it takes time. You don't just fast and then immediately connect to God, but say in like you have a month of Ramadan. After that month is up, you should be fairly cleared out of your ego blockages. Now, the final two, prayer and dancing, manual labor, marching, walking, whatever it happens to be, these are more reaching in towards a flow state. So, a flow state would be like you're not conscious of the work you're doing, but you're totally involved, and it basically is a way of you're occupying your conscious mind with action. It's like I had to start and stop this video so I could get some music in the background because that's how I get into a flow state. You just have background noise that you're basically listening to, and then you let your thoughts flow from. Saw a nice Venn diagram. It's the centerpiece between discipline and surrender, and that center point is the flow state. So the discipline is the action you're doing, and the surrender is allowing that channel to come down from above and speak through you. I always had a super deep flow state when I'd be drumming. I'd be, playing, listening to a song, playing along, and then while I'd play for 3 or 4 hours at a time, 5 hours at a time, and probably in 30 minutes in, you're not listening to the music, you're not listening to your playing, you're in an altered meditative state that is, it's like a pure, you can tell the difference. It's like a purified connection because you're using, this might not be the case, but I feel like you're using your left brain, your right brain, and then that center channel of the pineal gland through the spine is doing the true divine connection, and you're able to focus in right to the center. And if you're doing this, you're in the right type of altered state, and you want to set your intention for what you're contemplating. You don't want to just do this randomly and expect something to happen. You kind of have to have a problem or an idea or a seeking understanding of some sort, and you want to get an answer, and that will happen through a deep state that you get into by eventually, if you practice these 5 tenets, you will reach a place where you know how to snap into that very quickly. Now, the prayer and chanting is, uh, very common. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that's the basis of religion, really. And these recitations will purify. That's what they're designed to do, will purify your ego mind, inner self. And generally, there's all kinds of different prayers, but you could very easily come up with your own. And the Jesus prayer, Lord Christ, have mercy upon me, a sinner. It's a very, very basic prayer, and it works very well for me. If your mind's spinning out of control and you aggravated or in a shame state, you're very guilty. You're like, oh, why did I do that? You drop that prayer, and you can feel it inside your body, mind, spirit complex. It's pouring the anointing oil down your core self, and beyond that, there's a sound and resonance that happens if you're chanting. So, like in the Orthodox tradition, Orthodox Christianity, they do kind of mystical singing, chants, prayers, and that creates a resonance. And you know, while they're doing that, they're having the intention of connecting to God, and the power of intention is really what is able to direct your ghost driving a meat suit, and you want to get the meat suit out of the way of your true spirit and allow that to speak. And that's what they're doing, is they're occupying the meat suit and with the correct intention, and then you just let the energy flow in, flow down. And beyond that, the next section, I kind of just, it's dancing, marching, manual labor. uh, this is simple prayer, and sitting and contemplating is great, but there's nothing stronger than so Gurdjieff, yes, kitten. Gurdjieff talks about the three mystical centers of man. There's the intellectual center, there's the being center, and then there's the active center. And these three centers are the core of being, and nobody has them totally synchronized. So, for example, like the monk would be very strong in the intellectual center, but not so good in, uh, let's say, the the being center. Like a fakir who walks across hot coals is very strong in their being. They can tolerate all kinds of pain or adversity like that, or it, stuff coming from the being core. And then the yogi is kind of in between the uh, being and the intellectual state. And the idea is you want to synchronize these three. So you don't want to just be reading a book and you have everything memorized and you know it by heart. That's no good if you just stay in the tower all the time and there's no um, action behind it. Uh, the second Krishnamurti, UG Krishnamurti, I think, um, spoke about how life is action. And you can tell that um, in his beingness, he was very tired of the. Most of this thinking came from the upper class in the 1900s, and his beingness was very tired of the guru and the guru mentality where people just come and listen to somebody. It's like that's not the entirety of life. Life is living. You have to live and have action. You're not going to get everything that God has to offer simply by studying every book and going to every satsang. You have to live it, and be active and actualize the things you're learning. And it's very hard for any one person to master these three centers and be a totally unified being. I'll say from personal experience that I'm much more of a monk. Like, I have a very good intellectual understanding. I have a very strong, like, I'm trying to think of how to put it. But I couldn't go out and be like a leader of a monastery and like guide groups and do all the action of like uh, setting up like satsangs and that sort of thing. It's I have it very internalized in the self, and that compared to a fakir, which is you know, be somebody who sits in lotus position for 8 hours a day and simply meditates, or that level of physical. They would have a hard time explaining to you what they're actually doing. So that'd be the downside of a fakir. And that's what Gurdjieff is trying to teach with the fourth way, the way of the sly man, is that you really don't need any of those things. You don't need to dedicate 40 years of your life to a monastery, or, you know, lash yourself your entire life. We're trying to develop a holistic totality of a unified being. So, where it could be like, you're a Templar warrior monk. You ride all the way to Jerusalem. Your being is very strong. You read the book, meditate, contemplate, and you're, just as good with a sword. And you can, you can send their soul to the right place after you kill a man trying to bother some uh, pilgrims on the way to the Holy Land. And that's really what our society is missing, is that we've got all of the individual centers down, but now as individuals, it's our duty to start harmonizing within each of us these three ways of being and become the. I think this is kind of what Nietzsche is getting at with the Superman, the Ubermensch, is you're so strong in your intellectual, active, contemplative being that you're, totally peak state of being. And those five techniques are the way to start and way to get towards making a connection with God. Because he's always there and he's waiting for you to have interest and will speak to you. But you have to be honest with yourself first of all, and really, you know, the way I did it is like get rid of everything else in your life pretty much, and at least for the start, because you got to really lay a clean foundation. But from there, you're able to start building a connection, and as you do that, you won't be able to show off to people. You won't become monetarily rich. You won't become, superhuman strength, or you can beat anybody up with like crazy powers. I mean, that will happen, when, like, after 20 or 30 years of dedication and constant testing. Because that's what this life is one long test. And it's not like a, a school test. It's kind of like a placement. You know, your collective actions over your life will lead you to the place you deserve to go in the end. And God is merciful, love. He wants you to join Him, but that you got to do your end of the work. That's what the great work is about, and it will unfold all kinds of grand experiences you'll never be able to explain to anybody. But that's kind of the point: is that you're not trying to show off. You're not trying to impose yourself on anybody. You're not trying to uh, be as God. You're seeing how small you really are, and how materialism has kind of tricked us into thinking we're the top of the food chain. You know, life is about freaking get more, get more, get yours, and that works, but it ends in disaster. I mean, it's there's all kinds of stories about people who reach the end of their life and they're like, "Oh yeah, man, I freaking became the greatest scientist in the world, but I have no family and I'm totally burnt out and I haven't lived a day in my life." Or like, "Yeah, I'm the CEO and I have all this money, but I wish I freaking spent time with my family," or whatever it happens to be. Versus if you spend your life connecting to the one and God, you realize that, well, there's more than this life. Use this life for one task. Don't take it too far. You're gonna reincarnate. You're gonna, you know, you'll have another chance. Not even, it's more experience. It's not another chance. You get more experiences. Because it would be absolutely maddening insanity to be eternal from one life. I would hate to have this personality and body for an eternal time period. It just doesn't make sense. And but if you break up the suffering into stages, or basically you build Sisyphus, you push the rock up to the top, you die, and then the rock is at the top, and you're freaking in glory state for your afterlife period, and then the ball rolls back down, and then you come into another body and start again. And this is not from an ego mind perspective, but from like a grand totality of consciousness. Like, rarely do people know that they're a reincarnated person. Generally, you have no memory at all. I'm lucky enough to have. We have the internet now, and you're able to get like, so based on your interests in history, you'll be able to get like whiffs of what you may have been in the past. Based on understanding your family lineage and the history of that location at that time, you can kind of get an idea what you may have been. But who's to say? It's more likely than not you could be a black person and then reincarnate as the king of England, and then reincarnate as a freaking a fisherman, and just go all over the place. It's not like you know I've been reincarnating as a Northern European for 1,000 years. That doesn't really make sense. I mean, the world is pretty small in the eyes of reincarnation, but it's still, yeah. I don't think it's very likely you're in one spot the whole time. But yeah, those are the five tenets of secular connection to God. Some would call it, a gnosis thing or a mystical union. But you know, with how secular our culture is, I think people would really benefit from understanding there's a way to do this where you don't have to be a priest or whatever it happens to be. You can do it your own way. It might not be the quickest way, but it's the most authentic. It's your way, and you can pick and choose. And different traditions have unique outlooks, and I think that's where I find the most joy in it is looking at, like, oh, look at what Islam found out by doing this, and then versus the Christian idea and say, oh wow, they have a very unique take. It's not that one is uh, dominant of the other, which is the worst corruption of religion ever. Is this worldly mine's right, yours wrong? It's like, nah, man, we should take all human experience as a unique, and it has its place, and everybody can learn from somebody. Each one teach one. So yeah, interesting times. Interesting times. You think everybody's on the same page and would be willing to learn like that, but it's really not the case. There's so many more people that want something. They live their whole life trying to get something, and they've been getting the same thing for 1,000 years instead of getting more and deeper connection with source and creator, and the the immensity of the realities and the vastness of what's possible is that's what we should be working towards, instead of like, yeah, this life I freaking earned a couple milli, man, and then this life I freaking, I mean, worldly glory is such a joke. There's nothing there. It's devoid of all meaning, and I think that's why people are so insistent on, like, no, there's an afterlife and it's me. I want to believe I actually did something, but we're just cattle. We're just ants. We are very small. If you want to really be somebody, try to be an angel. Try to be a saint. But I think I'll leave it at there. I'm running out of steam on these three a day, so that's probably a good thing. But let's see if I can excavate any further thoughts later today out of my mind, and keep the ball rolling like a madman. I get really OCD and try to get it all out. But anyway, thanks for joining. Bloop.